Hello students. So today we will start a new chapter, that is self and personality, and this chapter contains a weightage of 10 marks. So that means 10 marks will come from this chapter in your board exams. Okay. So in this presentation today I will be covering concept of self and personality, self, both personal as well as social self as subject and self as object, personal identity and social identity, cognitive and behavioral aspect of self, self-esteem, self-efficacy, self-regulation, Western and Indian view of self. Let's start with the first topic, that is self and personality. Now see, self and personality, of course I'm pretty sure you all have heard about these two terms. So what is it exactly? So these two terms basically refer to the characteristic ways in which we define our existence. And these characteristics refer to the ways in which our experiences are organized and show up in our behavior. So from common observation, we uh, we know that different people hold different ideas about themselves, isn't it? So these ideas represent the self of a person. We also know that different people behave in different ways in a given situation, but the behavior of a particular person from one situation to another generally remains fairly stable. So such a relatively stable pattern of behavior represents the personality of that person. So therefore, different persons seem to possess different personalities, and these personalities are reflected in the diverse behavior of persons. Now let us go one by one. That is the concept of self at first. So self basically addresses the question of who am I? If I have to describe about myself, that is what myself is, the image that I carry about myself is my concept of the self. So the definition of self is, self refers to a totality of an individual's conscious experiences, ideas, thoughts, and feelings with regard to himself or herself. So, what you think about yourself, the total experiences, the total thoughts, the total ideas about whom you think you are, is known as the self. Now, how does it develop? It basically develops from your interaction with other significant people in your life, such as your parents, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, your teachers. So these are important people in your life. If they tell you something, it stays on with you and you start thinking in that direction. That is, am I like that? Why did they keep mentioning about me like that? So all the impressions stay on with you and you organize that experience about who you are. Okay, along with this, let's move on to the dual state of self. So let's look at the dual state of self, that is self as subject and self as an object. Now what is the self as subject and self as object? So as a subject, it's about the actor that you are, the doer, the knower. That means if I say I am a good dancer, that is about the actor that I am, or the subject of the self. Okay, and the other is the object, that is the consequences, the known or the thoughts and feelings. So if I say that I got hurt, that is something which is an object. So feelings, consequences, the known are the object. So be pretty sure to understand what is self as subject and what is self as object. Just remember that self as subject is uh, the one who is doing something, the actor. Okay, and as object, it is something which gets affected. Okay, so the feelings, consequences, this thoughts, etc. are the object of the self, and only the doing part, the knower, the actor part, is the subject of the self. Am I clear? So let's move on to the next kinds of self. There are two major kinds, that is personal self and social self. Okay, the personal self lays emphasis on those aspects of life that are only concerned uh, to the person. For instance, personal freedom, personal responsibility, personal achievements, personal comforts in relation to himself or herself. And there is one more kind of self, that is social, familial, or relational self. So the emphasis here is on the social aspects of life. For example, cooperation, unity, attachments with other people, compromising for other people, and sharing with other people. Okay. Then there are two kinds of identity. We again have the same kinds of identity like we have the kinds of self, that is personal and social identity. Okay. Now see, if somebody asks you your name, that is your personal identity. If somebody asks you about your quality, that is your personal identity. So the attributes or qualities of a person that make him or her different from others, that is personal identity. Next, social identity. Under social identity comes who am I in context of society. Am I a North Indian? Am I a Hindu? That is my link to my cultural and social group. Clear? Now let's move on to the cognitive and behavioral aspects of self. Now, cognitive aspects and behavioral aspect are the two different perspectives where there are two concepts each under the aspects. In your book, it has not been given separately, but I have separated it for you people so that it becomes easy for you people to understand and also remember that which concept falls under which aspect. So here under cognitive aspect falls self-concept and self-esteem. Under behavioral aspect, we have self-efficacy and self-regulation. Now all these terms are new for you people, but I'm pretty sure you all will be excited to know about this. So cognitive aspects of self, this includes two concepts. So it talks about self-concept and self-esteem. Now self-concept is basically the image that I carry about myself. I'm a good singer, I'm a good poet, I'm good at English, I'm good at sports, I'm average at the other areas. That is self-concept. Okay? The other is self-esteem. So esteem basically means your worthiness. What do I value myself? Do I think I am capable? So my judgment about my own self is known as a self-esteem. Now this develops in four different areas. But before that, there is also high self-esteem and low self-esteem. So high self-esteem, those who think highly of themselves, more accepted by others, are generally happier, more confident, usually perform better at school or work. And low self-esteem, those who feel less accepted and valued by others, are generally anxious, depressed, and may develop antisocial behavior. And studies show children develop self-esteem by the age of 6 or 7 years in four areas. Okay. So these are the four areas where it starts developing right from 6 7 years of age. And what are these? So it talks about social competence, cognitive competence, physical appearance, and physical competence. And how does it develop? Well, parenting plays a very important role here. Suppose a parents try and intervene in the way a child studies or the time children devotes to play or with his friends. Normally the child do not like it. But at the same time, if their intervention is restrictive, when they criticize the child, when they reject the child, when they pass comments on the child, well, the idea and the intention of the parents here is perfectly fine because they want the child to improve. But that may not be the natural style of the child. And of course, look at the kind of impact it has on the psyche of the child. The child believes what the parent says. If the parents say you cannot do it, the child believes it to be true. So, this is where the role of parenting develops self concept. Okay. The next concept, which comes under the behavioral aspect, the actual behavior, there are two terms again here, self-efficacy and self-regulation. So first comes self-efficacy. There was a great psychologist, a great behaviorist named Albert Bandura. So he has given this concept of self-efficacy, meaning thereby, do I think I can control the situations? Do I think I am effective? What do I think about my ability to do a task? For instance, a girl who does not really study much, but when she is asked questions, she has the thought that I can definitely answer. If I am asked questions, I will have the ability and the capacity to answer and justify myself. So that is the thought about whether you're effective, whether you will be able to handle that situation or not. That is self-efficacy. So basically, you have control over the situation. And then there is a strong self of self-efficacy, which allows people to select, influence, and even construct in circumstances of their own life. Okay. And last concept here is self-regulation. So self-regulation refers to our ability to organize and monitor our own behavior. People who are able to change their behavior according to the demands of the external environment are high on self-monitoring. So many situations of life require resistance to situational pressures and control over ourselves. Isn't it? Do you all agree or not? So this becomes possible through what is commonly known as willpower. You all have heard about this willpower? So as human beings, we can control our behavior the way we want. So we often decide to delay or defer the satisfaction of certain needs. So learning to delay or defer the gratification of needs, gratification here means pleasure, especially when gained from the satisfaction of a desire. So gratification of needs is called self-control. Okay, and self-control plays a key role in the fulfillment of long-term goals. So Indian cultural tradition provides us with certain effective mechanisms. For example, you all have say no fasting in vrat or rosa and non-attachment with worldly things for developing self-control. So that is basically why do people keep fasts and why there are people who perform rosa, though it is attached with religious string, but still it is a non-attachment with worldly things. Okay, how you can develop self-control. Now there are a number of psychological techniques of self-control. uh, there are three of them. First is observation of own behavior. So this provides us with necessary information that may be used to change, modify, or strengthen certain aspects of self. Next is self-instruction. Self-instruction is another important technique where we often instruct ourselves to do something and behave the way we want to. And such instructions are quite effective in self-regulation. And last, there is self-reinforcement. So this involves rewarding behaviors that have pleasant outcomes. For example, you may go to see a movie with friends if you have done well in an examination. Yes, you all do that self-reinforcing technique. So these techniques have been tried out and found quite effective with respect to self-regulation and self-control. Okay, let's move on to the next concept, that is culture and self. Now here we will talk about the Indian perspective and the Western perspective. Okay, so several aspects of self are actually linked to the characteristics and features of the culture in which an individual lives. For example, distinction between Indian and Western cultures, which we will talk about. So the Indian perspective or the Indian culture, uh, here we have a collectivist culture. We have a culture where the boundary between an individual and the society is not fixed. It is not separated. So both exist in harmonious coexistence. So this is where myself develops from the cultural influence. Western culture or the Western perspective. In Western perspective, if I want to achieve, if I want to succeed in life, if I want to look at my fun, my party, or on my own life, I don't want my children to be a part of my life. That is Western perspective, where you as a person and your society, your culture, people around you, there is a clear demarcation. That means there is a clear boundary, and it does not have that state of harmonious coexistence which exists in our Indian culture. Okay, so that's about the two concepts. I hope it is clear to you. Yes, so with this we can say that Indian culture, it is collectivistic, and Western culture, it is individualistic. Okay, so individual members of the group maintain their individuality in the Western culture. So with this I come to the conclusion of this part of our chapter. So today we have covered concept of self, self as subject, self as object, self identity. That is, we have also covered personal self, social identity, personal identity. Then there we have covered cognitive and behavioral aspects. We have covered self-concept, self-esteem, self-efficacy, and self-regulation. Please go through it and try to understand. Okay, thank you.